podcast. We are going to recap the month of January. And if you love snow, even if you like snow, this was the one for you. We broke our snow drought here. We were going to talk about the snow. We're going to talk about the stormy January, the temperatures, and join with me, my weather dad, birthday buddy, and New Jersey State climatologist, Dr. Dave Robinson. We were just together last week at the American Meteorological Society conference in Baltimore, although I didn't say this to you yet off camera, but I'm sorry I didn't see much of you. I saw you for like 5 minutes on an Uber ride together, and then I saw your talk, but then I had to leave before you were done talking, so that's the story. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, those conferences are very busy, and we had the Rutgers dinner together, but there were 30 people there, so it was tough to talk to everyone. And then, you get busy with sessions and you're running from one place to the other in the conference center, listening to presentations, giving presentations, sidebars during breaks. I had a big meeting for one afternoon regarding the Mesonet program we have, our weather network, part of a national meeting that had nothing directly to do with the conference, but many people were there, and that's why they held it that way. So yeah, it's not enough time, just not enough time.
No, it's not. I said, especially this year is a record number of people. I think 6,600 people in the door. And the way I can describe this, it's like Disney World for meteorologists. It's everything you could ever want, you know. If you're in the weather enterprise, you got the people, you got the food, you got the drinks. I don't know if there's like a ride, maybe, but you go up the escalator a lot. That might count.
I'll tell you, looking at the people there's Mickey Mouse and Goofy, no doubt.
Well, hopefully people weren't saying that about us. All right, so let's start off with the hard news first. This is our last episode of the Something in the Air podcast. I am focusing my time on our Across the Sky podcast, which Dave Robinson has been on before. Those are new episodes that come out every Monday. But this has really been an incredible ride for everybody who's listening. Thank you for listening over the past 5.5 years, which I'm like, Jesus, it's really been that long, but it has. And I don't know if you remember this, but this kind of was at a whim. We started the podcast. We met, or we saw each other, I should say, at an emergency preparedness conference in 2018 in Atlantic City. You were sitting on the other side of the room with Matt Gerbish, the assistant state climatologist. I was talking to you. I said, hey, would you want to maybe do an episode with me or about recapping the previous month's weather? And you graciously said yes, and the rest was history.
The rest is history, and I can't thank the listeners, viewers enough. We've taken a lot of hours of your life, and we apologize for that in some cases, but
sometimes we do.
Enjoyed our banter as well, because it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and on a personal note, I think we really developed our friendship from the podcast too. I did research with you in 2013, but just getting to talk with you once a month, and then obviously more in between. Came to my wedding.
I got a wedding invite out of
this. You got a wedding invite out of it.
It was a great wedding. It was a great wedding, folks.
Yeah,
it was a blast.
And that's another thing that's happened a couple years in the past now. But it's really been great to be doing this with you and to talk about everything in the past month's weather for all the listeners. My goal is at some point in the future, someone will go back on these podcasts because they need to dig out some weather info for something. Maybe it's in the year 2100. We'll see. But also, I want to give a big shout out to Mike Zabriskie and everyone at Stockton University, because they have been putting this on in video form for 3.5 years. We kind of got some bad timing. I don't know if you remember, but the first episode we did in video was we had you, I don't even know what platform it was, but in February 2020, and I was in the Stockton studio. You were in on like a second screen, and we did that for a grand total of 1 month. Because then COVID started the next month, and now I've been doing it here. But Mike's been awesome. The students and the interns who have been working on this has been, without them, we couldn't do this either. So
big thank you.
Yeah. I wanted to get the hard part out of the way first. Now let's get into our last recap here of 2024. And I guess we're going off on a high note for two of us who like snow. We had snow. It finally snowed. It snowed multiple times this month. Why don't you just take us through an overall look at the snow we had last month? What were the totals, month wide? How do we stack up? And then I want to get into that January 19th event after that.
Yeah, it was about average when it comes out of it. Atlantic City had at the airport had 4.6 inches for the month. They don't measure snow at the marina. We looked at numbers for South Jersey, and that includes everywhere from what are we, Burlington and Ocean County South, and the average was 6.6 inches, and that's 0.9 inches above normal. And if we look back 130 years, that's the 43rd snowiest January on record. So it was close to average. It was in the middle, but it was something. It was something.
We'll take it.
And we break the state into north, central, and southern divisions. So which division had the least?
Central,
where I live. The north had more. The central had about 4 inches. The south had over 6 inches. That storm on the 19th just made it barely up to Route 1 corridor, and I'm a little north of there. And so 10 miles south of me had twice the snow I had. But that's the way it goes. That's just the way it goes. And thank goodness the South got to see some snow. And my grandkids down in Delaware and Annapolis, Maryland, they got to see snow. And I got to see some nice video of them out playing in the snow. And I got on my cross-country skis one late afternoon for a little skiing before it all iced up again. But winter's not over. We're not going to get to tell you a month from now about the great storm of late February.
Might have to. That's a good forecast there. We might have to extend the show another month because I think the ratings might go bonanza if we get another blockbuster.
We can say anything we want about the next month now because we're not going to have to be held accountable next month when we cut the February.
That is true.
So,
Let me ask though. I just want to ask a question. Who had the most, or was it North or South that had the most in the state out of the three?
It was the Northwest.
Oh, okay.
On the 6th of January, High Point Ranger Station had 14 inches of snow.
Yeah. Okay.
So there were a bunch of places up in the northwest corner of the state that had 10, 15, 20 inches of snow. Okay. But you did pretty comparable to the northeast part of the state. Central Park in New York City only had like 2.3 inches. So South did better than anywhere except, kind of north of 78 and kind of west of the Parkway corridor. Up there, they had a little bit more. So, little to be proud of.
All right, I'll take it.
You got that one big event. And it was great to see everyone get a look at it. It's the first time really since January of 22 that the entire state was snow covered. Our report that's going to be coming out tonight or tomorrow that I wrote up and Matt Gerbish will be putting online tonight has a satellite image of the state on, I think, I don't remember, the 20th or something like that, showing the whole state with clear skies and snow covered. And you can see the dark pinelands where the snow is underneath the coniferous forest sticks out. And, take a look at that at njclimate.org.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm on your website now because I'm looking at some of these snow maps that you can also see on
we also have maps for each of the snowstorms.
So the 15th, 16th, storm in quotes wasn't really a storm, but it was a light snow event that was like generally 1 to 3. But let's talk about that January 19th one, because this one was there was nothing to sneeze at. If you were in the southern half of the state, it was the Norland Trough storm, which kind of maybe was the buzzword for that week leading up to it. It's a area of converging winds on the northwest side of a low pressure system, and you look at your map here and you see who had the highest totals. How about southern Cumberland County? I mean, I don't know how often that happens. I've never seen that myself. in the 6 years I've been here. But it was a storm in the southern half of the state. I mean, and let's put it this way: from a your local meteorologist perspective, I was a big fan of this because it started right before kind of sunrise, and it ended right before sunset. It wasn't an overnight thing. I didn't have to update into the night or do videos. So Mother Nature gave me a nice softball on that one. So I appreciate that. But it was a storm where it was like you said, Delaware. I don't know how much Annapolis got, but pretty much the far southern part of the state into Delaware cashed in. And my forecast was pretty good, but the one part, and I have no problem saying I was wrong, was the Cape May bubble of all places in Southern Cape. I thought they would switch over with some rain. They really didn't, and they ended up with about 3 inches all the way down to Cape May. But yeah, 6.5, I think, near Bridgeton, and 6.3 in Laurel Lake, or a commercial township in Cumberland County. So what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the Southwest did the best. When you go up through Cumberland, Salem, up to Camden, western parts of Burlington County, that's where you saw the 4 to 6 inches. No doubt plowable snow in many places. Maybe the main highways, they kept pouring salt on them, so they didn't need to get the plows out too much. But that was the brunt of the storm. As you headed towards the coast, a little bit less. And as I said, once you got up near about the Route 1 corridor north, it was just a couple inches at most. And it fell during the day, like you said. And there was enough solar radiation gets through the clouds that when you've got temperatures in the upper 20s, low 30s, and the daylight and a very slow rate of snowfall, it didn't stick on the roads until late in the afternoon as it was tapering off. Meanwhile, the South had gotten it at enough of an intensity that it covered the roads and became a much more hazardous situation. So, with the good comes the bad, and that was travel conditions that day were tenuous. But it's been a while. It's been a while. You didn't see it last winter.
No,
Pretty
no, we didn't. And,
bad.
yeah, and it kind of reminds me of one of the storms from 2 winters ago, where the southern half of the state saw the most and the northern half didn't, and this was pretty similar to that. But
Storms.
you know,
You had the two storms that winter. The early January storm, the North got nothing.
yes,
And then the late January storm of this is 2022, it got the whole state. But I believe, as I recall, the South had the most from that one as well. So Galloway Township was the snowiest spot of the state that month. And since there was like nothing else the rest of the
yeah.
winter, it was the snowiest spot in the state for the winter.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I always think of that late January one as like a shore storm. Like the further east you went, the more snow you got. But you're right. I mean, if you were in Atlantic or Cape May counties, that's where you cashed in because you had those two big storms that were there. But in Monmouth County and saw still 12 to 20 from that storm at late January. But it was a good event. If you like your snow, if you're one of those one and done people, and I know there's many of them out there, that was kind of satisfactory for you. If you're probably like Dave Robinson and I, we could use a couple more in our life in February and maybe March, to get us through. But talk to us as we go real quick. We have about 90 seconds left. What does the climatology say about snow between January into February? Is there much of a difference? Do we see different kinds of storms during those two periods?
Climatologically, February in the state has a little bit more snow than January, but it's really a toss up. And sometimes March or December can trump everything. So there's still opportunities as we go through the month. The ocean temperatures are cooler. So if you bring the winds a little bit off the ocean, you have a better chance of it turning over to rain in December than you do even in March.
Yeah.
So for those who are looking for some more snow, there still could be opportunities. Um, but it doesn't stick around as long. The sun's higher in the sky. So they're kind of in and out a little more quickly. But we've had some tremendous big storms in March. The 1993 storm, the 1888 blizzard. You can't
How was
let your
that one?
guard down. in March. But again, they generally tend to be short-lived events, and spring is just on the horizon. After all, the groundhog didn't see his shadow,
I
so we're
heard.
not supposed to have any more winter, right?
Let's take a break and we'll come back to you. We'll talk about those temperature combinations and we'll also talk about the stormy January we had in addition to that snow. You are listening to our last episode of the Something in the Air podcast. And we are back for our final episode of the Something in the Air podcast, recapping the month of January 2024. Well, we started 2024 just like we ended 2023, stormy. We had multiple storms throughout the month, and not just, hey, it rained a little bit. I mean, we had events that were over an inch, 2 inches of rain with this, and of course, we had the snow to come. So, overall, precipitation, I have to imagine, pretty wet in the southern half of the state.
And at one point I was counting back 40 days and 40 nights to see how
That's
much
not a
rain
bad
had
way to put it.
fallen since about the 10th of December as we went into early January. Yeah, it was another wet month. Preliminary values for South Jersey are 6.18 inches of rain and melted snow. We melt that snow down and take the water equivalent. That's 2.71 inches above normal, not quite twice the norm. And that ranks as the 7th wettest South Jersey January, going back to 1895. I can't remember exactly where South Jersey came in December. December statewide was the wettest. I think South might have been wettest in December. But suffice it to say, we started off with rain and snow event on the 6th. We had the big event was on the 8th and 9th, where
Yes.
some areas got 3 to 4 inches of rain out of that. And then the snows actually didn't add a lot of moisture. You melted that down, it was a half an inch, a third of an inch. That was more talking snow when we got into there. And then we had one rain event to close out the month after a very drizzly, dreary, drippy couple of days as well. So, yeah, I mean, there was something for everyone in January. I mean, let's face it, there was something for everyone across the state.
Yes. Well, January, I think typically, correct me if I'm wrong, has the widest range in temperatures when you're looking at the coldest and the warmest, it could be. I did want to go a little bit more into that January 9th storm because not only did it bring a lot of rain, but it brought a lot of wind too.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, Island Beach State Park got above 70 miles an hour in Ocean County, but there were multiple places that were over 60. And and I would say impactful part about that is that it wasn't just the shore that was above 60, but we were talking about places well inland that got the 60 miles an hour with gusts. I believe Upper Deerfield and Cumberland County got up there, but there were places in Cumberland, Atlantic, Cape May, Ocean, didn't matter.
Yep.
We had
Southwest.
wind. Yeah.
Yeah, the southwest corner of the state had the strongest winds overall, but everywhere south of 195 had wind gusts exceeding 40 miles an hour at some time during the storm. It was one of the windier statewide events. It doesn't trump Sandy,
Right.
but a handful of events at most have been that windy since that storm in 2012. So yeah, a very windy storm. And we had I think it was 13 days or so in January where someone in the state had a wind gust. One of our stations had a wind gust exceeding 40 miles an hour. I mean, that's almost half the days of the month. It was a very windy month, but nothing more so than on the 9th.
Yeah.
Now, right after the snow on the 20th, 21st, people may remember it blowing around quite a
Oh,
bit
yeah.
because we had some drifting come out of that as well. So yeah, it was a windy month. And it's January. It's the middle of winter where we have the more potent storms. So not utterly surprising, but the magnitude and the coverage, as you suggested, of that event on the 9th was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, we even get some nor'easters that don't, have winds like that, during the winter. I also took this, the air pressure, the minimum air pressure with that center of the storm was 975 millibars. That's a pretty intense storm. There's a number of category 2 hurricanes that are like that. So it was a potent storm that we dealt with. We had 37,000 Atlantic City Electric customers without
Really?
power down here. We saw other power outages throughout the state, but 37,000 Atlantic City Electric. That's a impactful storm. And AC Electric, just anecdotally, Atlantic City Electric has done a lot since Sandy on strengthening the grid. To prevent anything massive like we saw in Sandy. So even to see 37,000 is impressive, and hope and it's good that these are only happening on rare occasion. It's not like this is happening with every storm that's coming through.
The other interesting thing about that storm, those winds were coming from the southeast, and
Yep.
they pushed water up Delaware Bay into the lower tidal Delaware River to the point that a gauge, you could call it a tidal gauge, in the Delaware River at Burlington in Burlington County,
Yep.
a record high. Um,
Oh,
and that pushed water up the tributaries and did some flooding along the Delaware
right.
shoreline, Delaware River
Yeah, you
shoreline.
don't see that too often.
No, you don't. And it affected Chesapeake Bay as well, where there was significant flooding in um, in Annapolis and some in Baltimore. But then add the rain that fell, and up north, I know we're talking Atlantic County,
Taylor
up
Hamland.
north, the Raritan and the Passaic rivers, the main stations, went to major flood stage again. They had been
Yeah.
at major flood stage in December. In fact, in the Raritan, those two floods were the ninth and 10th greatest floods of the last century, and they were only 2/10 of a foot difference apart. Up in the Passaic, it was the ninth and 13th worst floods of the last century. Now, part of the reason why it was still so wet, so when the second storm came along, it it had a head start on bringing the water levels up in the river. So, wow, what a ride we had back in January. Just
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
question.
That,
What a way to
that
end. What a way to end all of this.
right. Just way to when end all this. And really, since December 10th, it was nonstop for us here at the press. It was always just storm after storm after storm. And then we ended off with that snow. Let's talk about the temperatures, because you were teasing to us before the break. They had some pretty interesting temperature combinations. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, we averaged in South Jersey 2.7 degrees above normal. AC Airport 2.3 above, the Marina 2.6. So that's a common number. Now that's not exceptional. Last January, if you remember, was the first or second warmest January
Yes.
record, depending where you were looking in the state. But this ranked around 25th, 20th to 25th warmest out of 130 years. So
Yeah.
it's in the top 20%. We're just so used to things being warm in the state in the last couple of decades. But there were some interesting contrasts. There was one day, and the date escapes me, later in the month, where the warm air, it's when DC got up to 80 and Norfolk,
Yep.
Virginia got up to 80. The warm air got into Cape May County, and we had a high temperature of 72 degrees there, where the rest of the state was 10 to 20 to 30 degrees colder.
Yeah.
That was the most interesting day. And you're smiling, so you must be thinking of that.
Yeah, it was the 25th is the day you're thinking of. Thursday the 25th. And these warm fronts, they never climb as far as the computer models say. But I did get a picture from somebody on the beach in Cape May, and it was like partly sunny, and like you said, it was very warm. And almost looked like it could have been a day in June or May maybe. But yeah, it was incredible and well above average there. And I think it was not that I think I know, was generally in South Jersey the warmest day of the month. But then we kind of had this like in the middle of the month, right? Like this cold snap. It's something we really didn't see any of last winter here. So it wasn't, I don't think any day was exceptionally cold. But it was, we had a couple of days below 32. the 20th to the 21st was below 30 or 32 degrees, both inland and at the shore, with the a couple of places in the single digits those nights right after the snow, because the snow helped to, cool the ground, because the higher albedo, during the day, the sun comes down, reflects off the snow, and then at night, it just continues to cool. So, again,
Oh,
nothing exceptionally cold, but it was something we haven't seen in
right.
2 years.
I think we had 3 days where none of our stations in our 67 stations, 3 days, none of them got above freezing for a high temperature. And last winter, I don't think we had one
Yeah, I
day. Oh,
believe it.
yes, we did. But remember last winter, right before Christmas, couple brutally cold days, right at the beginning of February, a couple of brutally cold days, and that was it.
Yeah.
This year, it lasted what, about 10 days or so, where it felt like winter and the ponds started getting some ice
Yeah.
on them. Not that they were safe for skating or anything.
No.
And the snow hung around for the better part of a week with a couple of snow events. So it felt like that old traditional winter, but was relatively short lived then. And we'll see, even if it comes at the end of the month, the snow will likely be relatively short lived. But that's the way a lot of people like it, Joe.
Yeah.
But let me also add for the listeners, it's it's months like January that give gray hair to meteorologists like Joe, and the difficult job you have in just seeing where that warm air is going to come on a day without any precipitation. See where that rain snow line is going to come on a day when we have precipitation. And those are days when I'm very glad I'm a climatologist
Right.
and not a meteorologist. So
You chose
kudos
well. Well,
for some
thank you.
pretty good forecasts this past month.
Yeah, it's well, thank you. It was it was it was challenging, but it was a challenge that, again, you didn't really get last winter, so you kind of were a little rejuvenated to talk about it. And thankfully, damage was minimal. I don't believe any lives were lost in any of this, so that's always the important part. You can have some fun with, with the forecasting, as long as all that, holds true. So we got 1 minute left here on our last episode. How about I just turn it over to you? I mean, you've done so much for this show. I just want to turn it over to you. You can shout out where people can continue to find your information. Maybe you want to share your biggest weather event since we started in mid 2018, but next
Oh my
45 seconds
goodness.
are yours.
Oh my goodness. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me in to do this. Our friendship has grown and I'm going to miss this. Anybody who's listened to this podcast knows, first of all, what good friends we are, how we enjoy what we do. And I
Yeah.
hope that has pervaded everything we've talked about. Continue to visit the state climate office at njclimate.org, or go to our website, njweather.org. And you can always contact us in the state climate office. Continue with your CoCoRaHS observing, or join up and become a volunteer, and just keep loving everything about the atmosphere around us. And of course, keep listening and watching Joe's broadcast of weather reports and other goings on. So thank you,
Wow.
both Joe, Mike Stockton, and everyone who's listened in. It's really been a fun ride.
It really has been, and this won't be the last you'll see Dave Robinson in my work. I'll be calling him. We'll be getting him in more. We can get him in more now that we're not doing the podcast. So we'll have him on different stories and things like that. We're going to wrap it up, though. We appreciate everyone tuning in over the past 5.5 years. Really appreciate it. We got our Across the Sky podcast you can listen to as well. New episodes there every Monday. For the last time, we will talk